Bernadette Walker was a creative, intelligent, and quiet 17-year-old with a passion for photography and vintage fashion. Living in Peterborough, England, she maintained a strong online presence where she expressed her artistic interests and thoughts. But beneath the quirky outfits and soft smiles was a teenager struggling with a dark secret one that would later become central to a tragic mystery. Her home life was far from picturesque. Her parents, Scott and Sarah Walker, presented a united front to the world, but behind closed doors, their marriage was plagued by instability and tension. Bernadette, sensitive and thoughtful, felt caught in the crossfire. Close friends noticed a shift in her demeanor. She became distant, withdrawn, even paranoid. On early July 2020, Bernadette confided something disturbing to a friend, someone she trusted deeply. She claimed to be going through something terrible at home. The friend encouraged her to speak to her parents or authorities, but Bernadette was terrified. She chose instead to trust a different family member with her secret, but that trust would lead to devastating consequences. On July 18, 2020, Bernadette vanished without a trace. The last person to see her alive was her own father. On the morning of July 18, 2020, Scott Walker claimed he was picking up Bernadette from her grandparents' house. According to him, they had a long, emotional conversation in the car. Bernadette allegedly opened up about her recent struggles and said she needed space. But what happened during that ride remains one of the most chilling gaps in the timeline. Scott, said Bernadette, jumped out of the car near a busy roundabout and ran off. He didn't chase her. He drove home and casually told Sarah, his wife, that Bernadette had fled. Neither of them reported her missing right away. In fact, a troubling 48 hours passed before police were contacted. By then, suspicions had already begun to surface. Bernadette's friends started posting her pictures online, begging for information. Her disappearance felt off. She hadn't taken any personal belongings, not even her phone. She had no money and didn't appear to have planned to run away. Meanwhile, Scott and Sarah's behavior was increasingly bizarre. Instead of joining search efforts, they focused on controlling the narrative, telling anyone who asked that Bernadette was just being dramatic. But investigators were about to uncover something deeply disturbing within the Walker home. Bernadette was always online. From posting thrifted fashion to sharing late-night thoughts on mental health, she lived through her digital world. But on July 18, 2020, that world went silent. No texts, no status updates, not even a scene on messages from friends. For someone so digitally active, her sudden absence was alarming. Her parents, however, tried to paint a different picture. Sarah Walker posted updates on social media claiming Bernadette had run away and needed space. But police noticed something strange. Bernadette's phone had connected briefly to the internet 2 days after her disappearance, likely from inside her home. Investigators started pulling phone records. What they found was shocking. Scott and Sarah had sent messages from Bernadette's phone to themselves, attempting to make it look like she was alive and in contact. One message read, "I just need to be alone. I'm fine." But the wording felt unnatural. Friends knew Bernadette's style of writing. That wasn't her. As pressure mounted, Scott and Sarah gave conflicting accounts to police. Meanwhile, forensic teams began combing through the Walker house and car. Something in the father's ice cold, evasive made detectives suspicious. They were no longer searching for a missing teen. They were chasing a crime. As detectives dug deeper, a disturbing portrait of the Walker family emerged. On the surface, they were just another working-class household. But behind the curtains, tension, control, and manipulation ruled the day. Bernadette's relationship with her parents, especially her father, was far more strained than anyone had imagined. Close friends of Bernadette came forward, revealing that she had recently confided a dark truth. She had accused her father, Scott Walker, of sexually abusing her. Terrified and ashamed, she kept it a secret for weeks, until finally revealing it to her mother. But instead of protecting her, Sarah allegedly dismissed the claims. She told Bernadette to keep quiet, to avoid tearing the family apart. This betrayal by the very people meant to protect her shattered Bernadette emotionally. Detectives now believed Bernadette's disappearance was not a case of a runaway teen. It was a cover-up. Scott had motive. Sarah had reason to stay silent. Search efforts intensified. Police dogs scoured fields. Divers checked rivers. Still, there was no trace of Bernadette, but digital evidence was starting to speak louder than any words. In deleted texts, browser history, and location data, a harrowing truth was beginning to form. No one was prepared for it. As detectives widened the investigation, they uncovered disturbing attempts by the Walkers to manipulate the timeline. CCTV footage showed Scott and Sarah driving around aimlessly in the early morning hours after Bernadette's supposed disappearance far from their home, in areas that raised eyebrows. Why would two parents, whose daughter had allegedly just run away, be driving around country roads at 3 a.m.? Police obtained audio recordings made secretly by Scott Walker. In one, he could be heard discussing how to create a believable story. "We just need to stick to what we said. Stay calm. No one will know," he muttered. It was chilling. Sarah, too, was implicated. Despite knowing Bernadette had accused Scott of abuse, She helped him delete messages and fabricate conversations from Bernadette's phone. She even used Bernadette's social media accounts to post misleading updates. The pressure was mounting. Forensics found traces of blood in Scott's car. It wasn't enough to confirm a crime, but it was enough to shake investigators to their core. Meanwhile, the public grew restless. Posters of Bernadette's smiling face covered walls, bus stops, and lampposts. But the silence remained. Where was Bernadette? And would the truth ever come out? 3 months after Bernadette's disappearance, police made a move that stunned the nation. Scott and Sarah Walker were arrested on suspicion of perverting the course of justice. The charge wasn't for murder yet, but detectives were confident. They were close. Public outrage exploded. How could parents go this far to cover up a lie? But the most damning evidence had yet to surface. Investigators retrieved deleted data from Scott's phone. Among the fragments were disturbing searches: how to get rid of a body without leaving a trace, how long before a body decomposes, can police recover deleted texts? And then came the most chilling Finda voice note Scott had recorded for himself. In it, he muttered, "She was going to ruin everything. She left me no choice." It was the closest thing to a confession yet, though Bernadette's body had still not been found. The circumstantial evidence was overwhelming. Police were now building a murder case without a body, a legal uphill battle, but one they were willing to take. The Walker home was no longer just a scene of dysfunction. It was now officially considered a crime scene, and the clock was ticking for justice. Building a murder case without a body is one of the toughest legal battles a prosecutor can face. But in Bernadette Walker's case, the evidence, though circumstantial, formed a dark and detailed puzzle. The lies, the digital cover-ups, the voice notes, and the suspicious car journeys all painted a horrifying picture. On October 12th, Scott Walker was officially charged with the murder of his daughter. Sarah Walker was charged with perverting the course of justice. The courtroom was silent as prosecutors outlined their theory. Scott killed Bernadette to silence her after she accused him of sexual abuse. Sarah, knowing the truth, helped him cover it up to protect their family image. Prosecutors revealed that Bernadette's last known location, according to phone tracking, was in Scott's car, not anywhere near where he claimed she jumped out. They also showed how her social media was used days after her disappearance to fake activity. But every message was crafted by her parents. What they didn't have was a body. No remains had been found. That absence became Scott's defense. No proof of death, no murder. But the prosecution argued something more powerful: the silence of a girl who never would. VA stayed quiet this long. In June 2021, the trial of Scott and Sarah Walker began. The courtroom buzzed with tension as Bernadette's photos were displayed. Her bright smile, her quirky fashion, her young, promising life now reduced to evidence in a murder case. But the prosecution's focus was sharp. This was a case of betrayal so deep it cost a daughter her life. Key witnesses testified: Bernadette's close friends, teachers, and even her grandparents, recalling her fear, her cries for help, and the emotional toll of being unheard. A diary entry found in her room was read aloud in court. "No one believes me. If something happens to me, please don't let them get away with it." The room fell into silence. Scott showed little emotion during the proceedings, while Sarah wept through most of the sessions. Prosecutors accused her of choosing her husband over her daughter and actively helping him deceive the world. The defense tried to paint Bernadette as unstable and rebellious. But the overwhelming digital evidence and testimonies destroyed that narrative. The public followed every update, horrified by how deeply a family could fail their child. Justice was within reach. But no one knew how the jury would rule in a case without a body. On July 23, 2021, after weeks of testimony, the jury returned. With their verdict, the courtroom was silent, every breath held as the foreman stood and read the decision. Scott Walker, guilty of murder. Sarah Walker, guilty of perverting the course of justice. Gasps and quiet sobs echoed through the room. Though Bernadette's body had never been found, the evidence of her parents' lies, manipulation, and cold-hearted actions had been more than enough for the jury. Scott showed no emotion as the verdict was delivered. Sarah wept uncontrollably, her shoulders shaking. But for the many who had followed Bernadette's case, this wasn't just justice, it was a heartbreak laid bare. A reminder of how trust can be used as a weapon, and how silence can kill. Scott Walker was sentenced to life in prison. Sarah received 6 years. Judge condemned them both for their cruelty, deceit, and complete lack of remorse. Still, one painful question haunted the community: where is Bernadette? The courtroom victory brought accountability but not closure. Her body was never found. Her resting place remained a secret Scott refused to reveal. Yet even in death, Bernadette's voice had finally been heard. Though justice had been served in court, Bernadette Walker's story continues to echo far beyond the trial. Her disappearance, born from betrayal within her own home, struck a national nerve, highlighting the terrifying reality that not all dangers come from strangers. Sometimes, they live under the same roof. In the months following the verdict, communities across the UK rallied to support young victims of abuse. Organizations launched new campaigns urging young people to speak out and for adults to listen. Bernadette's name became a symbol for silent victims, and her case sparked national dialogue about familial abuse, trust, and the failures of those closest to us. Her friends and supporters planted a memorial garden in her honor, filled with sunflowers. Her favorite, a plaque at its center reads, "She tried to speak. We will not stop listening." Despite years passing, Scott Walker has never revealed where Bernadette's body is hidden. That silence, his final act of cruelty, continues to haunt those who loved her. But her memory lives on, not just in grief, but in the growing awareness that no cry for help should ever be ignored. Bernadette Walker vanished, but her story will never be forgotten.